guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with the finale for my big fat eyeshadow project. This is a project that I have done this year to get to know my palettes better, and I wanted to wrap it up today because I have completed all my palettes. As you might be able to see, I have two different eye looks on my eyes today, and that's because I was running out of time a little bit. So one of the palettes I did two different looks with today just to get two looks in. So that's why I'm looking a little bit different, but I feel like I pulled it together. I feel like I did the rest of my makeup the same on both sides, but I feel like it works on both sides, even though one is more warm tone and one is more cool tone. But yeah, I quite like how this turned out. However, I'm gonna go through the palettes today. Quick note, by the way, because normally in this project I do my eyeshadow bank, but I'm not going to include that in here because I'm going to do that update in January once I have the whole month to collect points. The reason is because I want to wrap this project up now because I want to post my eyeshadow palette declutter before the end of the year, and I'm going to use the ranking system in this one a little bit to help me choose my palette. So that's why this video might be a little bit shorter because of that, but I'm going to jump into it. But before I do so, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So we're going to start off with the palettes in order. I'm going to start with this palette right here, which is the Divine Rose 1 palette from Pat McGrath. You can see what it looks like. It's a beautiful, more cool toned leaning color story. I absolutely love this palette, and it's such a beautiful one. And it's of course the great Pat McGrath quality. Let's jump into the 3 looks I made with this palette. So for day number 1, we're starting off with this look right here, and I started off with the shade Rose Dusk all over the lid and in my outer corner, crease and lower lash line, so kind of like all over. This is more like a satiny shade, and I wanted to use this one as a base. Then I used the shade Veloria as a blending out shade, which is just the kind of mauve tone matte in the palette. For my inner lid and inner corner, I topped that off with the shade Iridescent Pink 003, which is that like white looking shade. It's kind of like pink to goldy orange type of duochrome, but again it's more of an iridescent shade. And then also on top of my inner lid, I went in with the shade Astral Solstice, which is the last shade in the palette. I absolutely love that shade. And to finish off the look, I used the shade Extreme Mahogany on my outer corner just to deepen it up a tiny bit, and that was look number 1. For look number 2, I did this look right here. I started off with the shade Veloria in my crease and outer corner, which is that kind of mauve shade again. Then I went in with the shade Lovelies all over the lid. I took the shade Astral Solstice again as an inner lid topper. I absolutely love that shade, like I said. And then to wrap up this look, I used the shade Skin Show Nude on my inner corner, and that was look number 2. A bit of an easier one, but I absolutely love how that one turned out. And then lastly we have day 3, where I started off with the shade Extreme Mahogany, which is actually the deepest matte in the palette, and I used this one on my outer corner as well as in my crease. The shade blends out beautifully as a crease shade, so I did that for this look. I wanted to stay away from too many mauve tone shades. Then I used the shade VR Rose Venus, which is a pink to gold duochrome, and I put that on my center lid. And then I used the shade above it, Refined Gold 002, and on my inner lid. And for my inner corner, I used the shade Skin Show Nude again, which is the first shade in the palette, and that was look number 3. Again, I wanted to do something slightly different and use more of the bronzier tones in the palette. So yeah, that is the first palette right here, which is the Divine Rose 1. With this one, I managed to use most of the shades. I think I used all the shades apart from one. For this palette, I have used this shade twice. This one twice. This is the shade I did not use, which is Sable Bronze. I used Define Gold 002 once, same with Iridescent Pink 003. Extreme Mahogany I used twice. I used Lovelace once, Rose Dusk once, VR Rose Venus once, and Astral Solstice twice. So that is this palette right here. Let's go through the ranking. So for this color story, I gave it a 4. I said this palette has a bit more of a boring color story for Pat McGrath. However, it's still very well made and very usable. I feel like I always rank Pat McGrath color stories high, but she just makes them so well. So 4 there. For versatility, I gave it a 3. I said this is not the most versatile model shade palette. You can make quite a few mauvier or cool tone looks, and there's a good range of depth. There even is a way to get some more brown bronzy looks, but they do kind of lean more neutral to cool tone still. But yeah, even with those kind of bronzy looks, it is still very limited. So, well, not very limited, but relatively limited, so 3. For quality, I gave it a 5. I said I love this quality. Again, Pat McGrath always does eyeshadow so well. You can even take these deep outer corner shades and easily sheer out and blend as a crease shade without any patchiness, and the shimmers are so special. Another hit, so 5 there. And then personal ranking, I gave it a 4. I said I do like this palette. It's not my favorite Pat McGrath palette nor favorite palette in my collection, but I really enjoyed my time with it a lot. So that's 16 out of 20 points in total. Then for the second week of the project, well, it's not full weeks now because we had to cram more palettes in the last bit of the year, but for the next palette we went in with the Going Coconuts palette, which looks like this. It's a beautiful neutral type of color story. It has quite a unique undertone. It's more like on the cooler side, I would say, but it's quite unique to a lot of other palettes I have. So let's show you the looks that I made with this one. So we're gonna start off with this look right here. I took the shade Lovely Bunch on my outer corner and crease, which is the more kind of warmer toned crease shade in the palette. I then used the shade Cocoa Crush all over the lid, which is a beautiful shimmer shade, and I also used that one on the lower lash line. Then I went in with the shade Nutty as a liner along the outer corner, and lastly Palm Reader on my inner corner. So that was look number 1. A beautiful, beautiful look. I really do like how this one turned out. Then for day number 2, I wanted to do something slightly different, and I wanted to go for a smokier look. So I started off with the shade Get Cracking all over the lid, which is one of the, it's the sequin shade in the palette. Then I took the shade Colada on my crease and on my lower lash line. That is the kind of cooler toned crease shade in the palette. I then went in with the shade Nutty again, and I smoked that along my upper lash line. I went in with the shade Cocoa, which is the deepest shimmer in the palette, and I used that all over the lid. And for my corner I used the shade Palm Reader again, and that was look number 2. Again, I wanted to do something slightly different, and I went with that smokier look, and I really like how it turned out again. And then for day 3, again wanted to jump into slightly different undertones, and I went into like the reddier tones in the palette, and that is by starting off with the shade Shell Yeah all over the lid, which is the kind of, again, reddier tone. I then used Lovely Bunch in my crease, and then lastly Shredded to blend out my brow bone. Then I actually went in with the shade Palm Reader on my inner lid and in the corner, and that was the shimmer shade that I decided to go with in this look. So I ended up using 1 shimmer per look. But yeah, that was day number 3. So this is the palette right here. I did use all of these shades, I believe. Yeah, I did do no pan left behind on this one in that week. And I did use Shredded once. I used Palm Reader 3 times, and this is actually my Expandos pan, so I'm supposed to use it 5 times. But so far I reached for it 3 times. I'm gonna probably try to reach for this one 2 more times before the end of the month, just because it's an easy corner shade anyway, so I will hit my goal on that one. But I didn't manage to do it yet, but I'm also just filming this one on the 20th, so I still have time left. Then I used the shade Colada once, I used Lovely Bunch twice, Cocoa Crush once, and Shell Yeah once. Then we have Get Cracking, I used once, the Cocoa I used once, and Nutty I used twice. So that is this palette right here. Again, let's go through the ranking. So for this palette, for color story, I gave it a 3. I said this is a useful but quite boring color story. I do love the undertones of the shade, and it's surprisingly unique, but there really isn't anything groundbreaking or very creative about it, so 3. For versatility, I said 2. You can only really get neutral to cool tone looks with this palette. Yes, there is a good range of depth and slightly different undertones, but it's not the most versatile, so 2 there. For quality, I gave it a 4. I said this is a really good palette for Colourpop. Not all Colourpop's palettes are made equally, but this one is definitely a better one. The mattes blend nicely and the shimmers are relatively impactful for standard shimmers, of course. And that is 4. For personal ranking, I also gave it a 4. I said another palette I like, but again, it's not a tip-top favorite. Again, I do love the undertones here, and they are unique to me, but it's not a palette that excites me, even if it is practical. So even though I do like it, again, it's not a favorite, so 4. And that means that this palette comes in at 13 out of 20 points. So this is where in the video we are moving on to like slightly different rules, I guess, because in this project I had a rule to create 3 looks with every single palette, but unfortunately I've run out of time and I realized that wouldn't be possible. So for the remaining 3 palettes I stuck with 2 looks per palette, which is kind of what I'm doing today. That's how I did my last palette, which again, slightly cheating, but I did do 2 looks, so it works out. So for the remaining 3, like I said, I do only have 2 looks to share, but I feel like that still gave me an idea of like, you know, what kind of looks they would like make. I could also use majority of the shades and see how they perform and stuff like that. So at least, you know, it gives me a better idea. But ultimately in a dream world, I would have liked to do 3 looks. But it is what it is. I am again filming this quite early, and I was needed to do 5 palettes this month in order to reach my goal. So it is what it is, like I said. So the next palette we have is my Luna Beauty Eternal Eclipse palette. This one looks like this. It's actually a palette that I hadn't really used much because it got passed down to me from my friend, and I have done no palette behind on this one last year, but I didn't really use it as like a whole. I just kind of took one shade here and there and made looks with it. So it was very exciting for me to reach for this one because I wanted to see how I liked it. So let's start off with look number 1, which is this one right here. I took the shade Sandstone on my crease and outer corner, and then I blended that out with the shade Dusk, so I put that in my crease and more on top of my blending shade. Then I took the shade Desert Sky, which is a shimmer shade, on my outer lid, and I realized that is, you know, a little too deep for what I wanted on my outer corner, so I had to take a deeper matte. So I added the shade Summer Sky just to again get a little bit more depth on the mattes. Then I took the shade Flare and I put that on my inner lid and inner corner, and then to merge those 2 shimmers I took the shade Gold Dusk on my center lid, and that was look number 1. Honestly, not my favorite look, but you know, well, I'm gonna talk more about it later, but yeah, that's my first look. And then for look number 2 is the one I wore in my Deco Panning video, if you saw that, my Deco Panning finale. And I started off with the shade Lagoon on my outer corner, which is a matte blue. Then I took the shade Smoke in my crease, which is a grey kind of tone shade. I wanted to stick with more kind of cool tones with this look. Then for my outer lid I took the shade Starry Eyed, and then for my inner lid and inner corner I took the shade Adamantium, which is a silver shade, super beautiful shade. And then to help kind of tie the smoky lid with the lower lash line, I took the shade Deep Sea and again smoked along my lower lash line, and that was look number 2. So those were the 2 looks I made with this palette, and with those 2 looks I actually managed to hit a lot of the shades. I didn't use anything twice, so all of the shades that I used I only used once, and the ones I did not get to was the shade Meteor. I used the rest on the top row. I did not use Rose Thorn nor Earthbender, so those 2 I did not use. And then I did not use Night Sky. So only 4 shades I didn't use, which is pretty good. I will try to dip into those before the end of the year. But yeah, that is this palette right here. And again, let's go through the rating for that palette. So for color story I gave it a 3, and I said this is definitely a smokier color story and it's very unique in my collection, but I also don't feel like it's the best one out there. So 3. For versatility I give it a 2. I said there's a good option here for neutral looks and for smokier grey kind of blue looks, which is the 2 looks that I made. The mattes are beautiful and has a great range. However, the shimmers are either very light in a corner type of shades or very dark outer corner shades. So that's the kind of problem that I fell into with this palette. I never had like a lid shade that I liked. Either they were like way too smoky for me and like for what the mattes I feel like for in the palette, or they were just too light and I feel like there was nothing to bridge between like the really light shimmer and like the darker mattes or the darker shimmers. So that's something that really put it down a lot for me for versatility. I guess it kind of comes into color story too. Then for quality I did give it a 5. I said the shadows in here are beautiful. The mattes are some of the creamiest I've tried and I love them. The shimmers are also unique and have dimension to them. So even though it's not like kind of shimmers that I like going for, they were still really unique, and yeah, I did enjoy like the shade of them. They just weren't the right tone for me. Then for personal ranking I gave it a 2. I said so I hadn't really played with this palette as a whole before, but honestly it really isn't a favorite. I wish I could have done all 3 looks, but I ran out of time. However, I already know this color story is too smoky for me and not something I would reach for organically. I do love the center mattes shades of mattes, but it's not a Sophie palette. So 2 there, and that means that this palette comes in at 12 out of 20 points. So we have 2 more palettes to go. The next one is this beautiful palette right here, which is the Snow Dreams palette from ODai. This is the last of the Christmas releases that I had not yet used. I've been saving it for this project, and yeah, I was really excited to dip into this one. It has a lot of beautiful shimmer shades as well as obviously mattes. I do think it's like split half and half with shimmer and mattes. But yeah, let's jump into the looks for this palette. So for day 1 I actually ended up doing a get ready with me, so you might have already seen this look. But I took the shade Guess on my outer corner and on my lower lash line, which is the red in the palette. Then I went in with the shade Boots, which is the first shade in the palette, and I used that to kind of blend out that outer corner shade. I didn't want it to contrast any corner, so I used the shade Snowflake, and I packed that into my lid and in a crease, which is like a light minty shade. And then to bridge between those 2 mattes, I used the shade Frankincense, which is a silver holographic shade, very, very stunning. And then for my inner corner, I used the shade Hugs. And then lastly, I used the shade Garland as my brow bone blending shade, just to get a little bit more of a blend there. And that was the first look. So again, very, very stunning one. You would have again seen this one if you watched my Get Ready With Me, or I think I wore it in like another video too. Oh yeah, my introduction to my what's it called, year of usage product pan. I wore it in there too. But yeah, really love how this look turned out. Super, super stunning. Then for day 2 I did more of a subtle look. I wanted to contrast that really dramatic look that I did my first time. So I started off with the shade Feast on my crease, which is like the neutral brown in the palette. Then I took the shade God Jul on my outer corner, which is actually a Swedish saying. It means Merry Christmas in Swedish, God Jul. But yeah, that's just the warm matte brown on the bottom row. Then I took the shade Hugs all over the lid, which is a beautiful, beautiful shimmer shade. I really do love this shade a lot. And then for my inner corner, I actually went in with a matte shade, which I rarely do, but I went in with the shade Goodwill, which is a matte white, just to tie that look together, and that was look number 2. So again, with this palette I was not able to make a third look, which is a bit sad, but I'm happy with the 2 looks that I made. So for this palette, again, I used obviously not all of the shades. I wish I could have used more. I definitely wanted to make like a green look, but I didn't get to it. But I will do that again. I'm excited to play with this palette more. But let's go through what I used. So I used Boots once. I didn't use Celebrate. Feast once. Hugs I used twice. Frankincense I used once. Goodwill I used once. Marian Ornament I did not use. Then for this row right here, I used Snowflake. I did not use Sweater. I did use Guest, but I did not use Traditions. For the last row, I did not use Magic. I used God Jul. I did not use Tinsel, but I used Garland. So about half of the palette I used, but that is this one here. Again, let's go through the ranking. So for color story, I gave it a 4. I said this is such a fun color story. I only had time to do 2 looks with this palette, but I have so many ideas of what to do with the rest, which tells me all I need to know about the color story. For versatility, I'll also give it a 4. I said again, as there are so many contrasting colors and so many things you can do with this palette, it helps create a lot of versatility. There's even more kind of neutral leaning shades that you can make really simple looks with, as you could see, and the 2 looks I made could not have been more different. So 4 there. And then for quality, I gave it a 5. I said ODai truly has such a good formula. The mattes are good and nothing to fault, but the shimmers makes my heart go. I love them and they are truly so special and up there with my single shadows. And then for personal ranking, I gave it a 4. I said this is not my favorite ODai Christmas palette, but I really enjoy it. I can't wait to work with this palette more and make more looks. I really hope that this one rolls into, for example, my product level up next year. So that is the last rating, and that means that this palette comes in at 17 out of 20 points. Alright, so we have one more palette to go, which is this one right here, and it's also the 2 looks that I have on my eyes today. So this is the Visor Paris Edit palette, and it's a beautiful color story. You can see it right here. It's such a soft, romantic type of palette. I absolutely love it. Yeah, let's just talk you through the 2 looks that I'm wearing, because again, I do think they're really stunning and quite different from each other for this palette. So I'm gonna scooch closer a little bit so you can see it better, and we're gonna start off with this more purpley look right here. So I'm gonna look down so you can see the look and read out what I used. So I started off with the shade, by the way, I'm gonna butcher these French names. I started with the shade Patel on my crease and blending shade, blending kind of, yeah, crease I guess. Then I took the shade Fleur below it into my direct crease. Then for my outer corner, I used the deepest plummy shade called Cerise, and then all of my lid I went in with the shade Opera, and I also used that one on my inner corner. And then on my lower lash line I used the shade Tuileries. Not sure if I'm saying that properly, but that is what I'm using on my lower lash line in this look right there. Moving on to this look right here, I might just push my lashes a little bit, but hopefully that's fine. So for day 2, well, the same day, but look 2, I went in with the shade Creme Brulee on my crease. And then for my outer lid, I went in with a shimmer, actually, it's the shade Maraise. Then I went in with the shade Peretti on my center lid, which is more of a sparkly type of shade. I used the shade Box Arts on my inner lid, which is a lighter kind of gold shade. And then for my inner corner, I used the shade Champs-Élysées. Again, sorry for the French people watching. I know I've never been able to pronounce French things, but that is just like the kind of light gold inner corner shade, and that is look number 2. Again, this one right here. So let me roll back a bit again, and we're going to go through the usage of this palette again. These are the 2 looks where I used them. So I went in with this shade I've used, this shade I used, this shade here, and this shade here. So I used all of the shades on the top row. For the second row, I used everything apart from this light pink. So I used this one, and this one. And then for the bottom row, I did not use this one, but I did use the remaining 3. So I used this one and this one and this one as well. So I did use majority of the shades. There's only 3 that I did not get to in these 2 looks. But again, there's only 12 shades in this palette. Alright, so we are on to the last rating of the last palette in this project and in my collection. So for Color Story, I gave it a 4. I said this small Color Story packs a punch. Yes, it is more of an everyday palette, so not the most creative, but it's soft and not necessarily warm toned or cool toned, as you might be able to see, yet both at the same time. I'm never worried the shades won't work together despite having such different undertones, which is just such a, I don't know, it's just such a well-made palette. I don't understand, because again, looking at this, I feel like this is a very warm tone look and this is a very cool tone look, but at the same time I feel like they still have something in common. And I would easily kind of mix these colors together, and I feel like they would work together, and it's just, that's what I mean, it's just such an interesting color story. Then for versatility, I gave it a 3. I said, as you can see in my eyes, on my eyes today, you can make 2 very different looks. Most of the looks are variations of neutral tone looks though. There's a good range of depth, even if I wish there was a darker brown matte. So similar to the darker purple on that other corner, I wish there was a similar darker brown matte. But overall it's a pretty versatile for a neutral palette. Quality, I give it a 4. I said Visio has such a beautiful formula. Remember, it's going to be more buildable though. I was going to give it a 5, but I had issues with one of the shimmers not sticking to my lid over the matte until I used glitter glue, and that is kind of like the outer corner shade here. I just had a little bit of issues, so I put some glitter glue down to make it stick, but otherwise everything else worked beautifully, so 4 there. And for personal ranking, I gave it a 4. I said this is such a beautiful palette. It's an easy palette for me that I really enjoy every time I dip into it. Is it a palette I think of when I think of my favorite palettes? No. But is it one that I think very highly of? Yes. So 4 there. And that means that this palette got 15 out of 20 points. And there you guys, we have it. Those are actually all of the palettes in my project and everything that I needed to rank. I do now have all of the ranking officially. I did do a 6-month update on the rankings, but my plan is to, in my video tomorrow, post my eyeshadow ranking that I got from this project. So I will list them from like bottom to top, so you can see exactly which palettes are my favorite, just judging from the ranking. Of course, there is like, you know, things coming into play like color story or versatility or quality, stuff like that. And you know, some palettes might be absolutely amazing and some of my favorite, but the versatility might be rubbish, so that's going to bring down the score. But I think overall it gives me just like a better idea of the well-rounded best palettes in my collection. So I'm excited to post that video tomorrow. The reason why I'm also getting this video up a little bit early in the month is because I do want to do an eyeshadow palette declutter, and I'm going to use these rankings a little bit to help me what to declutter and what to go through, because the lower ranked palettes are going to be up for a declutter. So I will post that later. I think that's actually going up on Christmas Day, so you can stay tuned for that. I haven't filmed it yet, but I will film it probably tonight or tomorrow, so that it's ready for Christmas. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the series too. It's going to be the last episode and last video in the series. I have really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of work, I'm not gonna lie, and it has taken away from a lot of eyeshadow panning this year because I have to do like these exclusive looks. But I'm really proud that I stuck to it, even though, you know, last month now I did kind of cut corners a little bit. I didn't do 3 looks with every single palette. It was 3 palettes I only did 2 looks with. But again, considering I'm filming this, you know, like what, 2 weeks early, because normally I film this around the 4th of the month, like, you know, next month. So I would film this beginning of January, and I'm not filming it on the 20th of December. I feel like I did pretty well. So I'm very proud of myself and I have enjoyed it. I hope you guys have done too. I will see you in my next video in Vlogmas tomorrow, and I hope you guys are having an amazing day in the meantime. Bye guys.